Joining me are Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now Director of GXO Strategies, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Look, Cameron, I've got to ask you, the shenanigans in Canberra today with the Immigration Minister, with the Home Affairs Minister, yesterday with the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen. How bad was today exactly?
Well, this was as bad as the worst days of the Gillard Rudd government. And for those of us who had to live through that awful time, it felt like a series of deja vu seeing the ministers struggling. I mean, Clare O'Neil's press conference could only be bettered by a Wayne Swan press conference, which was often a train wreck. So, no, it was a terrible day and a terrible week for the government.
But, Michael, why? I mean, this is the basic thing, of course, and she looked as guilty as hell. Why wouldn't Clare O'Neil deny she had abused her department head and left her in tears the 6 times or so that she was asked?
Well, it's quite obvious, Andrew. She's not going to affirm the fact that she's abused somebody. And secondly, the denial is the only position that's left, or going silent on it. But look, Cameron's right. That was an appalling. The press conference, the footage of her walking up the hall, ignoring the journalist, was terrible stuff. I mean, you wouldn't do that if you were on top of your game. You'd be making jokes or you'd be doing something. They're under pressure. They're a real problem for the Albanese government, but I don't think he's going to move them. I don't think he's going to do anything. I think he's going to have to ride this one out, and he will continue to ride it out whilst he's still slightly ahead in the polls and his popularity's up there, because, giving a scalp to the opposition will, I think, open the floodgates, because the 2 most incompetent ministers are the ones you mentioned in your introduction. The Minister for lowering our standard of living, Chris Bowen, and the Minister for destroying our productivity, Tony Burke. And, they are really the problem long-term for this government. These 2 can be hidden away if they can be, but Albanese is not going to risk his political capital on them, I don't think.
Yeah, but Cameron, look, you've been a Chief of Staff for a Labor leader, right? And there's a lot on the Labor leader, and you got to all be robust. Now, the head of O'Neil's department paid, what is it, $900,000 or some huge amount of money. Shouldn't she be tough enough to take criticism and even give back feedback, leaving in tears? I mean, are we making too much of someone who's too sensitive, or is there an issue here?
I think there's an issue here. We know that Albanese let it slide when Penny Wong was proved to be a bully to one of her Senate comrades, to Kimberley Kitching. We know that Penny Wong was a bully. So why else wouldn't we find this bullying culture with other ministers within the Albanese government? I say the fish rots from the head, Andrew, and it's Albanese's leadership that's let this happen. Foster is clearly a very senior public servant, very experienced, and there's no way anyone should leave an office, a minister's office at the very least, in tears because they were bullied and belittled for doing their job, which was telling us the truth about all the criminals and the pedophiles and slave traders that we've been let out in the community because of the incompetence of Giles and O'Neil.
Now, I must say that Kimberley Kitching also told me before her death, only days before her death, again, that she'd been bullied by 2 people who are now Labor ministers, female, including Wong, but I have to say, both of them deny having bullied her, so I should add that as well. But Michael, again, just playing devil's advocate, were the Liberals simply playing politics by refusing to pass Labor's legislation to make it a crime for foreign detainees to refuse to cooperate with being sent home? On the face of it, is there much wrong with that idea? Were the Liberals just trying to, create havoc? Or is there a genuine issue here?
Well, look, I think the Liberal Party of the coalition did the right thing. I think confronted with a bill at 7:30 in the morning and having a demand that it be passed, and then finding out in a hearing the following night that night that there was no urgency. They've played this brilliantly, in fact, because they seem to support hard measures, but at the same time are not supporting the government, and they've let them out to hang to dry for the next couple of weeks. So I wouldn't be criticising the opposition. They've done their job. The responsibility lays fairly and squarely on the shoulders of those that came up with this strategy, and I doubt that the strategy came up from the 2 ministers. It's clearly come out of the Prime Minister's office. because you could hear the talking points. They were just repetitive. It was like two parrots in a cheap pet shop, and it was terrible.
Cameron Milner, I mean, this might be an easy question for you, predictable. I don't know. I'm going to ask. You've already heard Michael say that he doesn't think the government's going to do anything about these two ministers or any of the ministers. I mean, I think Chris Bowen should also be moved. Linda Burney has got to go, just clogging up space. I mean, there's just so much dead wood that's got to be moved and embarrassments moved. He doesn't predict anything. But I wonder, do you think the government should maybe move on the Home Affairs Minister, the Immigration Minister certainly, particularly, they let in 550,000 immigrants in just 1 year for a start, sack them, replace them with, say, Bill Shorten, the former Labor leader, who at least has got a lot more experience and wouldn't be in this, kind of shtuck.
Well, I think Bill's doing a great job in the NDIS. So I mean, I wouldn't want to move him from a critical portfolio, which we actually need to get right for people with disabilities in Australia. So I think Bill's doing a great job there. But there's a conga line of incompetence at the heart of the Albanese ministry. I mean, what more do you have to do to get sacked by this government and by this Prime Minister? So it's a real problem. And Giles and O'Neil, Miles, who had fights with all of his generals only recently over Australian defence policy. There's a pattern here. And unfortunately, Albo lets it slide because Albanese doesn't like detail, doesn't really care. As long as he's going to VIP events and getting tickets and flying on Toto 1 at 40,000 feet, that's what he thinks the job is. Well, it's not. And that's the problem at the heart of the Albanese government.
Now, Cameron, I think keeping Bill Shorten in, yes, there's a lot of money involved. I mean, it's the portfolio that's eating the government alive financially, the NDIS. But in terms of politics, I think he should be right in the firing line, a shield. But I suspect you might be trying to urge him to stay out of trouble, not make an issue. Cameron Milner, Michael Costa, thank you very much to you both.